At least 150 Bangladeshis are now dead, over 1,000 have been arrested, and Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is facing arguably the biggest challenge ever to her decades in power.
Increasing authoritarianism, dismissiveness, I call it arrogant, and most importantly, over the last 3 terms of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, it is not only that the government has become much more autocratic, it is also that it has become very personalistic autocracy.
Hi, you're listening to State of Southasia, a podcast from Himal Southasian, where we speak to some of the best minds on the region to unpack crucial issues affecting our politics, cultures, environments, and societies. I'm your host, Nayantara. In early July, students in university campuses across Bangladesh began peaceful protests against a government job reservation scheme. The issue has escalated into unrest and violence across the country, with clashes between protesters on the one hand and the police, the army, and pro-government gangs on the other, resulting in a large number of deaths and in thousands injured. Here's a quick wrap of what's been happening. The quota system that the students were protesting reserves 30% of government jobs for the families of veterans of Bangladesh's liberation war, and also a smaller proportion of jobs for minorities, women, and the disabled. This left only about 44% of government jobs open to people outside these categories. Bangladesh has been experiencing high unemployment rates, and the students were already anxious about their job prospects when they graduate. The quota system was introduced in 1972 by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, who was then the Prime Minister and who is the father of the current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and he did this as a temporary measure. But successive governments in Bangladesh have kept the scheme going, and the Awami League, when it has been in power under Sheikh Hasina, has extended the 30% reservation to children and grandchildren of veterans, and even allowed the seats to remain vacant if candidates within this group did not qualify. So after a massive student protest in 2018, Hasina's government was forced to scrap the whole quota system. However, potential beneficiaries of the veteran quota then approached the High Court against the government's decision. Now in June, the High Court delivered its judgment in the case, reinstating the quota system, which then led to the present standoff. Even though the government itself did not bring the quotas back and said that it would appeal the High Court decision, Hasina made a remark comparing the protesters to Razakars, a deeply derogatory term in Bangladesh, as it refers to those who collaborated with the Pakistan army during the liberation war. This intensified protests, after which the government called in police to crack down on protesters. Student and youth wings of the Awami League, such as the Chhatra League, attacked protesters, leading to the first instances of violence. Soon the whole country was caught up in the turmoil, with violent clashes in the streets, the army being deployed against protesters, and on the weekend of July 20th, the government imposed a countrywide curfew and shoot-on-sight orders. A large number of students have been reported killed, and because of the curfew and an accompanying internet shutdown for several days, there have been conflicting reports as to just how many deaths have occurred. A leading Bangladesh newspaper, Pratamalo, said that 173 students had been killed, and many suspect that the number might be much higher. Many thousands have been injured. After 10 days of this mayhem, the Supreme Court passed an order scaling back the quota system, allowing just 7% of government jobs to be reserved, of which 5% was for veterans and their families. As we record this episode on Wednesday, the 24th of July, there has been a let-up in the violence, and the government has announced an easing up of the curfew. In a piece for Himal Southasian, which you can find on our website, senior journalist Kamal Ahmed said that this upheaval goes beyond the quota system and signifies a deeper discontent among the public against a malaise within the ruling regime that has become increasingly corrupt and autocratic. So to make sense of how Bangladesh has come to this point, I have with me Ali Riaz, distinguished professor at the Department of Politics and Government at Illinois State University. His research is on democratisation, violent extremism, political Islam, South Asian politics, and Bangladeshi politics. He's also the president of the American Institute of Bangladesh Studies. We're having this conversation between Normal in Illinois and Bangalore, where I am. Professor Riaz, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with this quota system itself. In the past, and that is before the 2018 student protests, the Awami League government under Sheikh Hasina was adamant about holding on to this system and extended it to the children and grandchildren of veterans. Some observers of Bangladesh say that this is because the scheme had been a way to reward party supporters and loyalists. Do you find that to be true?
It only tells the part of the story in the sense that, of course, this gives the government an opportunity to employ those who are supportive of it. So it is a way of patronage dispensation. There's no doubt of it. But as I said, it tells only half of the story. Most important to me is not only patronage dispensation, it is also about capturing the state. I describe this government, unlike the previous ones, as a regime. Why I say regime? Because regime is not temporary. The regime is somewhere between the state and the government. Government is very much temporary. Every 5 years, if there is a free election, it changes, right? In all democratic countries. But regime wants to alter the basic administrative as well as system of governance. They decide who would be in politics, who would not be in politics. They would decide that who would benefit, who would not benefit. So, and this regime, when they're transformed into a regime with a definite agenda of transforming the state for a longer period, they try to capture the state, all state institution. So all this quota system, it is not only about which is allocated for the freedom fighters and their descendants. It is entire scheme, entire idea is to capture the state. So that is what has been happening. That is what has come. That is what we need to look into. And just dispensation would not tell us the whole thing. So my argument is this, that it is beyond simple dispensation of patronage. It is about changing the future trajectory of the Bangladeshi state and having control over it going forward.
Right. So in that case, is the quota system a symptom of a clientelist political economy where this party, this regime, maintains control through patronage of its supporters?
Sure. I mean, this is definitely symptomatic. This is symptomatic in various ways. I mean, you are talking about the clientelist political system. Definitely that. But look, with respect to this movement, the quota movement, quota reform movement, which would be the exact expression, why students are so much into it, why they're opposed to it. Look, every year 400,000 graduates from various universities. Annually, at best, 3,000 gets the civil service job, right? So why 400,000? They're not going to get it. Only 3,000 jobs are there. Even if everything, there's no quota, nothing, all based on competition. Only 3,000. So why 400,000? Why so many students? It has become a symbol for the students, how the entire system has been rigged and stacked against them. Because what this system does, it restricts opportunities. It restricts opportunities and availability of jobs, employment. But it is not only there. Look, for last decade or so, the government claims that there has been GDP growth, which is understandably, there has been growth. Some of them are inflated numbers, but even that, if you look around, you'd see, yes, economy has prospered because of the struggle of the RNG sectors, workers, because of the remittance and so on and so forth. But it is a jobless growth. So students do not see that there are opportunities for them in employment. And then they see a system which is already rigged against them. They see as a symbol of all these things. So the quota system has become a symbol On the one hand is, as we talked about, patronage dispensation, clientelist politics. And then you add to this, not only Quota, there have been reports of leaking, selling this public service commission exams, those who are connected. So it is stacked in two ways. One, if you have money, you can buy it, buy your way into it. If you're connected to the political party in power, you can get it. So where am I? The students ask that question. So the quota system becomes a symbol of this whole situation, lack of opportunities, lack of any kind of access to employment. And also they see that, okay, this reflects the political system that unless you're connected to. So this system is about small group of people. You're connected to the regime, you're beneficiary to the regime, and then you serve the regime, you're okay. Right. And they see it not only in employment, they see it in economy too, because those who are connected to the regime are getting these bank loans, defaulting it, nothing happens. There are other ways they see it. So there needs to be a symbol, right? And this is the symbol. Quota system for the student became a symbol of this whole situation that Bangladeshi society and economy has produced over the years.
Right. You talked about jobless growth. I also want to ask what the perception among young people is of a public service, a government job versus a private sector job. Is it still considered a more secure means of livelihood? And that's also why there's so much feeling about the quota system and massive number of jobs being reserved for these categories.
It is, in terms of the total number of jobs, it's very small, but that is a secured job. Mm-hmm. And also, once you get into this, the likelihood, that you progress in some ways, if you keep your heads down, so to speak, or align with the regime. Politicization of public service administration has been going on in Bangladesh for a long time. All regimes have done it. But since 2010, it has taken an enormous proportion. It has become what, in political science term, if I may use it, a party hierarchy, basically everywhere. Whether it is the public service job, it is everywhere that party man gets the preference. So, but the private sector has not produced this much job. Why? Because of the economic policies. 39%, according to Bangladesh Bureau of Statistics, 39% of youth between 15 and 25, are neither in education, nor in employment, nor in any kind of training. 39%. Government claims that the unemployment rate is about 4% or something. At least 14% of the youth are unemployed. So you see that they would look for a secure job. They would have actually not looked for the secure job if the economy had prospered, because usually private sector offers you more salary, more other kind of opportunities. But the government's job, the public service job, is a secured one. Some would go for that. Let me tell you, when we were students, of course, our friends have gone into the public service because they wanted a secure job. They liked, some of them actually wanted to be part of the administration to do good for the country. And at that point, Bangladesh economy is not prospering this much. But some of our friends have gone into the private sector, banking and these and that. Why? Because they said, okay, it is far flexible. It gives me more money. It gives me more freedom. All sorts of things. So this is, the security is one. Of course, the government jobs have perks too. That is also one. Prestige, nevertheless, you are a civil servant, that gives you prestige. But if the economy had created more jobs in the private sector, this would have a less impactful issue than it has become.
It might have drawn in fewer people to those protests if the economy...
Absolutely. I mean, they would not, the entire, a large number of students see this, as I said, as a symbol, and they would not have actually thought about it. They would have actually explored for something that, okay, there are other opportunities that I can go for, and they would have done it.
Right. Talking about Sheikh Hasina and the Awami League, this is, of course, her fourth consecutive term in power, apart from when she came to power in 97. She's been prime minister since 2008. And, a lot of people, again, commentators on Bangladesh, have said that the regime has become increasingly autocratic and increasingly corrupt. And we've also seen it recently in the kind of dismissiveness of the protesters' concerns. Her comment on the Razakars and not being able to gauge what kind of backlash that would actually have. What do you make of how this regime has shaped up over these four consecutive terms? And has a result of that also been that she's completely out of touch with what's going on with the people in the country?
Here I will take a step back and go back to your previous question with respect to why the students have become so much dissatisfied. The job part is one that we've discussed. This is what brings to this question. The students are also, dissatisfied about the political circumstances. Look, these are the students, right? 18 years, 19 years? They haven't had an opportunity to vote in a free election.
Right.
In any country, even in Bangladesh, in 2008 election, what was the buzzword? What was the thing? Youth are going to make the determination because the huge number of first-time voters. We speak of this first-time voter, well, we talk about the United States, we talk about any democratic system. What are these younger people going to do? How they are going to vote? Because they are the future. They will. That's what happened in 2008. 2008 election, Awami League won, and with such a majority because the younger population put their faith and confidence in Awami League, right? And these are the students now, look, 18, 20, 25 years. They haven't had an opportunity to vote. They were supposed to be the kingmaker. Now they have no voices in this system. If they go and try to express something in the cyberspace, they have been persecuted because of so-called Digital Security Act. Now they have transformed that into put in a new package called the Cybersecurity Act.
Right.
It is related to what you have asked, that increasing authoritarianism, dismissiveness. I call it arrogance. But and most importantly, over the last 3 terms of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, it is not only that the government has become much more autocratic, it is also that it has become very personalistic autocracy. With the change in the constitution that took away the caretaker government system, which may not be perfect, but it provided a guardrail against large-scale rigging.
Right.
That was gone. That was gone in 2010. Subsequently, these elections have been rigged to that extent. At one point, on one of the elections was described by an international media as transparently fraudulent. Very interesting. Everyone knew what is going to happen. So this is what happened over the years with respect to the autocratization of this. All these institutions have practically withered away. I mean, in the sense that they're diminished, their strength and influence, decimated would be a better word, I suppose. Why these institutions decimated? Look at, including Public Service Commission, which is in charge of, this civil service appointment. Election Commission, the entire electoral system has been, now nobody has confidence on this election commission or electoral system per se, because they know. Look at the police, law enforcement agencies, and all sorts of things. Institutions are decimated so that one individual becomes extremely powerful, becomes invincible, becomes irreplaceable. So it is not only that Bangladesh's journey post-2009 has been sliding towards autocracy, it was sliding towards much more personalistic autocracy. And that is what, we have witnessed. So going back to this, the Quota reform movement is one thing. What happened subsequently on Thursdays and Fridays? It is not only the students, hundreds and thousands of people, mostly younger. Now that we are getting a little bit of information, The extent, I'm afraid we might not even know how many people have been killed. But if you look at those we know for sure, latest figure that I know, it is close to 200, 193 or so, which have been actually reported. So the point is that look at this. These are younger people. Most of them are younger people. Why they were on the street? Because of this the economic situation that we have seen. All this talk about the growth and all sorts of things didn't deliver. And then you don't have an opportunity to express yourself. This is, truly a perfect storm. What we saw Thursday, Friday is a perfect storm. Why? Because of this combination. So students, youth, everybody is dissatisfied.
You yourself were a student activist. You have been on the front lines of police fire. What were you thinking and what did you feel when you saw what's happening in the last few days?
I'm shocked. I'm at loss. I know, in the sense, the loss of what? I mean, I don't know how to explain it. Don't know, because, as you mentioned, I was a student activist. I have been a participant of pro-democracy movement. When General Rashad was in power, we were on the streets, we fought. I've seen people die, in front of me. Unfortunately, we were on the street. But the scale that we have seen, and again, we don't know even the extent of it. Whatever came, this, drops of information is making me so uncomfortable. I don't know. I'm worried. Worried sick because we couldn't talk to the people that I need to talk to. I know there are 8 to 10 million Bangladeshis who are outside. For days, for the 5 days, they didn't know. It's not a regular day that, okay, I didn't talk to my mother or my brother, is fine. I'm going to talk tomorrow. They're hearing all these things and they don't know whether they're safe. Whether the younger brother that they have, has he left home? Has he come back from the street? Is his face? The sister who is a university student, when she was pushed out, could she come back home? Was she attacked? Is she safe? These are the kind of 10 million Bangladeshis. And many of them are actually the pillar of Bangladesh, in the sense that their remittances has built and continue to build. They are the ones. But the atrocities, the massacre, that we actually gathered information. Those who experienced, I don't know how long this trauma this nation would carry. Right. I don't know.
So how has the Awami League come from being the party that, spearheaded the nationalist movement for independence 50 years ago, standing against the atrocities committed by the Pakistan army, to 2008, giving the youth hope and having them vote for it in large numbers, to this regime where it is deploying the army to use brute force against young people and its own citizens?
Parties change. In this country, in the United States, remember, the civil rights before the civil rights movements, if you go back, it is the Democrats who were actually opposed to civil rights, and the Republicans were supporting of it. Now it is the other way around, right? Parties change. Because of the leadership, it changed. Because of its focus, it changes. At one point, the Bangladeshi and the international observers and the academics would call the Awami League as a secular center, left of center party. It is no longer that party. Look at the discourse. Each and every time, they actually evoke the religion. Prime Minister at one point said that Bangladesh should be, ruled with the Medina Charter, the religious document, right? And they have made compromises with conservative Islamist forces such as Hifazat Islam. The love-hate relationship with Hifazat Islam.
Right.
Their sources has. So is it a left of center political secular? So in the conventional term, is it? No, it is not. This is a political party. So political parties change. Political parties change when they're in power. In opposition, they can change too. But what happened in this instance, the transformation of Awami League, is, the temptation of power, temptation of, it doesn't see itself as a party which goes to the government and comes back to the opposition, goes to it has transformed itself to create a regime that would control not only for 5 years, beyond that, because they want to shape the state in their way, and forever. And they haven't hide it, in some senses, repeatedly they say that they say they're going to be here for until 2042, 2040. They keep on saying it's not about, yes, parties want to be in power. Who doesn't? And that's why they are a political party. They are not charity organizations, right? They are not Oxfam. They are a political party, whether it is Congress in case of India, Republican Party in case of United States, Tories in case of Britain, or, so the point is that this transformation has taken place because the autocratic tendency. Having said that, is it completely out of the realm that Awami League could have done it? No, it was not out of the realm. Look, let's not forget, it is a political party of 75 years old, right? 75 years. It led in various movements, the pro-democracy movement during Pakistan period. It took part in 1982-1990 movement for the pro-democracy, right? It stood on the street, or at least opposed between 2007 and 8 against the caretaker government. This is a tradition. But let us not forget the other thing. This is the political party which created a one-party state in this country.
Right.
75. So should we just highlight the democratic credential of the party? No. We should also be aware of the fact that there is some ingrained, perhaps, idea of, that they should actually rule for a longer period, either through, de jure or de facto one-party system.
Right. I'm going to take a quick break on that note to remind all those tuning in that you can find all Himal stories on Bangladesh politics and trace how things have played out in the past few years on our website. For instance, you can read our contributor Anupam Debashish Roy's article on how the Bangladesh government used the Digital Security Act as a tool of oppression. And also listen to a conversation that I had with him last December about the Awami League government cracking down on the opposition in the run-up to the election. You can find these stories and more on our website, himalmag.com. Himal's in-depth independent coverage of the whole of South Asia relies on the support of listeners like you. To support our work and to help us produce more podcasts like this one, you can become a patron of the magazine by clicking on the link in the episode notes or by going to our website and clicking Support Himal. You can also sign up to our newsletters and keep up with our latest stories, podcasts, events, and more. You'll see a sign-up link to our newsletters also in the episode notes. Now back to our conversation with Ali Riaz. So some of our readers have written in with this question for you. What has the opposition's role been in this protest? So, some commentators have suspected the role of the opposition in kind of fanning the flames of the protest for their own convenience. From what you have seen and heard coming out of Bangladesh, how far do you think that this is true?
I haven't seen any kind of evidence beyond offering moral support. The opposition political parties had participated as an organization in this movement, especially Thursday, Friday. Before that, it was entirely student movement. Within that, pro-government, students were there too. I mean, one of the key, coordinators of the Students Against Discrimination was a former leader of Chhatra League. So was there supporter when the students agitated? Were there supporters from the opposition? Of course, they were. They're students in the first place. They have every right to be in a political party or student wing. So in that sense, they were there. But if we are talking, and the government's allegation now that they are bringing up this, that the opposition incited, what are the evidence that opposition incited? As a matter of fact, some are very critical of the opposition that despite this situation, widespread discontent, when the people came on the street, there was no opposition leader was found to lead this, to steer this.
Right.
As an opposition political party or parties, given that they think that this regime's, they need to fight back this regime. Shouldn't they have been on the street? Shouldn't they have been actually declared programs? They didn't, So the government's argument that, opposition fanned the flame. Rather, what I have seen, what I have gathered, Thursday and Friday situation, and of course, I don't have the complete picture. Nobody does, as a matter of fact. Thanks to the government for this entire communication shutdown, which basically was intended so that you and I don't get the information. So what we've gathered is this: it is a leaderless and a completely spontaneous grassroots, and which might have contributed to some of the destruction that we have seen. No political party in right mind would actually attack the government offices. I don't think that is possible. I don't think were there provocateurs? We don't know. Agent provocateur could be there. We don't know, and unfortunately, we never know that.
Right. But, speaking of the opposition, now that all this has happened and there's clearly so much discontent and disaffection towards the Sheikh Hasina government, where does the opposition stand? Because, after the election in January, it seemed like the Awami League had pretty much effectively stifled all political opposition. Is there an opening now for that political opposition to make a strong stand against the Awami League?
I hope so. I hope so that they would. I mean, I'm not encouraging violence, of course. That's not my intention by any means. But given the restrictions that have been imposed, given the persecution that we have seen, given the weaponization of the judiciary that we have seen, it is very difficult for the opposition to stand. But then that is when you are fighting back an autocratic system, that is what you have to bear. Whether the opposition is ready they've tried through the constitutional means and all sorts of organized protest, and they haven't succeeded in large measure because of the repression that they face. But also there is one other thing that I keep on insisting, that opposition political parties, irrespective of their ideological differences, if they really want to reverse the course of autocratization, they have to come together. They have to decide what is their first priority: restoring the rights of the people, voting rights to begin with, or perhaps even before that, the right to assembly, right to speak. These are the basic fundamental things. Anything beyond that, you cannot achieve until and unless you have that. You mentioned of the stifling, the opposition. These are the situations that are stifled. The culture of fear has permeated the society because of the enormous capacity of the state, surveillance capacity, and we have seen the coercive capacity in the past days. We have seen, right, how devastating, how ruthless it can be, if it is given the opportunity, and which has been officially, shoot on sight. Even before they imposed that one, Thursday and Friday, though, it is practically shoot on sight kind of situation that we have seen. Hundreds of people have died,
Yeah.
So the opposition needs to reevaluate what they want to do. If they really want to reverse the course, they have to come together, and they have to be, take a stand and pull the people together. And in the history of Bangladesh shows that this is where the political parties, opposition needs to come together. They haven't done it yet, unfortunately.
Is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is the main opposition party, does it provide a credible alternative to the Awami League and to Sheikh Hasina?
As a matter of fact, it is not only BNP we are talking about. Does BNP offer an alternative? Any opposition at this point actually offers an alternative. Alternative doesn't actually, it's not a playbook that it's not a book that you can buy in a bookshop and read the page number 13 and say, here is the conditions.
Right.
Alternative emerges out of the movement, emerges out of the popular aspiration, right? What is the alternative? When we are talking about alternative, what alternative are we talking about? For me, give this opportunity to the people to make that decision. A free, fair, inclusive election, and then let everyone go to them. They might actually elect Awami League. I have no problem with that.
Right.
I have difference with Awami League. I have difference with BNP and other political parties. I do not carry anyone's, water. But where is that opportunity? That is the alternative. This is at this point, the alternative is to demand that the people have the right to express. People have the right. Recapturing the state by the people. That is what it is necessary. So all these tasks that whether what they would do, we have seen them previously in the government and all sorts of things. Parties change. Situation prompts parties to take different kind of steps. It is not about who would be in power. It is about whether the people would have the opportunity to decide who would be in the power.
Right. I just want to take a bigger picture view now in terms of implications for the region of what's been happening in Bangladesh. And, let's just look at India, for example. In the run-up to the election in India a couple of months ago, Kamal had written about how people in Bangladesh were tired of Hasina cozying up to the Modi regime, of India's interference in their election in terms of propping Hasina up, and India's strong-arming Bangladesh in terms of trade and its economic relationship. Anupam had written about the India Out campaign soon after the election, calling for the boycott of Indian products, very similar to what had happened in the Maldives earlier. So given this degree of irritation with India among Bangladeshis, what can this upheaval against the Awami League government mean for India? And should the Indian government worry about discontent spreading to the northeastern Indian states, for example?
The last part, I don't think they should be worried about spilling it to Northeast India, because that is not going to happen. Bangladesh's internal demands and demand for democracy, demand for inclusive political system and inclusive economy would not resonate with Northeast India. So it is not going to spill over unless the scale of brutality forced people to flee Bangladesh and cross the border. So that part is, let's put it aside. The role of India with respect to Bangladesh is, to me, is a very myopic policy that Indian establishment and Indian policymakers have been pursuing for last 10, 15 years. I call it myopic because what they are doing, putting their eggs on one basket, that is Sheikh Hasina. And Sheikh Hasina, I'm not talking about Awami League. It is increasingly, to me, evident, obvious, that they are putting all their, hopes and pinning hopes and everything on one individual. That is Sheikh Hasina. Right. She has delivered. For India, she has delivered. There is no doubt. By her own admission, what she has given to India, India will remember it forever. That is, she said. I am not saying that. And it is years ago. And thereafter, she kept on giving, which has not been reciprocated. Which has not been reciprocated. But why I call it myopic, because they're thinking that Bangladesh is going to be there for what, 5, 10, 15, 25 years? No, please, listen. Bangladesh is going to be there for next 100, 200, 500 years. It is an independent country. It is not going to go anywhere. So what they are putting, they are, creating, a generation, and maybe more than a generation, who would actually remember India, not because India in 1971 supported Bangladesh's war of independence, provided shelter to 10 million people, that it stood with the, fighters materially as well as morally, that it became the mouthpiece of this movement in the international arena. That is 1971. But gratitude is not sufficient to Indians, it appears to me. that they think that it is going to continue generations after generations after generations. No, it doesn't. We may think of it, but it doesn't.
Right.
Instead, what they remember, ask someone who is what? Today is 2024, an 18 years old kid. Ask him. Ask that youth what they know about India. They know that India actually influenced Bangladesh's elections in 2014, that India has provided unqualified support to a regime which day in, day out became more autocratic, and India not only supported this regime, but it also went out in public perception to influence United States so that they don't. That is the memory they have. That is the memory that is going to be there. So the anti-Indian sentiment, which is I have not seen this kind of anti-Indian sentiment in my entire life, what I am seeing now. Why? It is not that they ask anything from India. What they expect, that India would not actually interfere and influence and stand against the aspiration of the Bangladeshi people. That is what they want. So yes, I mean, the way it is going to stay there is for decades, that this sentiment, which is growing. Are there those who see it differently? Of course. Bangladesh has 170 plus million people. So I'm not saying that 169 million people are of the same opinion. No. But in a country, it's a neighbor. And let me tell you one other thing. India's perception with respect to the neighboring countries is that they look the neighbors through the security threat perception. It is not dignified to tell a neighbor that, oh, I think you might be a problem for me. This is the approach the India has taken with respect to Nepal, with respect to Sri Lanka, with respect to Maldives. Looking through the security prism, reminding Bangladesh each and every turn that India thinks that they could be a security threat. It is very undignified, very undignified. This is for a sovereign state. Is Bangladesh equal? In some sense equal. In some sense it is not. India is a big country. Bangladesh cannot walk away from this neighborhood. Neither can India. Bangladesh is not going to go anywhere. India would have to live with this. But they need to understand, reminding Bangladeshis every morning that, oh, I am seeing you through this prism of security is really disturbing. The other thing is this, I mean, since you have brought it up, the other myopic thing is this binarization in Indian public and policy discourse. What is that? Either it is Awami League, or in their perception is it is the pro-Pakistani ISI-inspired political dispensation. That's wrong. There has to be, any country, there is a nationalist feeling about upholding the sovereignty of this country. Are there a small group of people who might be actually, be sympathetic to Pakistan? Could be. I cannot guarantee you that 170 plus million people, everyone would be thinking in the same fashion. Either or again. But a country which has earned its independence through a war, a people's war, let us not forget that it cannot be a simple dispensation that A versus B, and there is no one who can stand up for the interest of Bangladesh. These are the younger people. These are the future.
Okay. Are there any other implications of, it's quite extraordinary what's happened in Bangladesh, but anything else you're seeing in terms of implications for South Asia at this point? Or we just have to wait and watch to see how it plays out?
You are absolutely correct that we will have to wait and see how it works and plays out in Bangladesh. One thing I can say that however you see from on surface, what we see, essentially there is no way that it would return to the pre-15th of July, let's say. Situation, the ground has shifted. That is what I see. You may say, okay, if the ground has shifted, why people are going to the office, or will there something we don't know. What would come in the next weeks or even months, we don't know. So we'll wait and see. But one thing is this. Last week has laid bare that Bangladesh is a regime which cares less about it. Otherwise, any government, it doesn't have to be even democratic. Forget about that part. No government which actually thinks they need a moral legitimacy can actually go on and have this kind of massacres, unprecedented in the history of Bangladesh. This has led to be, you and I may, for the moment, go have our daily lives. Bangladeshis will have to survive. Whether they go on that route, I don't know. Whether the students would come again on the streets, I don't know. It is an uncharted territory. But, how long the brute force would be able to get them down, I don't know. But what I know for sure, if a little bit of political history of Bangladesh, a little bit of understanding as a student of political science, the ground has shifted.
Right. And finally, let me ask you for 3 recommendations for our listeners for something to read or watch or listen to on Bangladesh's political history, or something that, explains the current moment in the country.
As for the current movement, my suggestion would be to follow as much possible independent international media. I'm not going to specifically refer to any books because there hasn't been any. The essays currently that we are seeing is just coming out and with very limited information. But with respect to understanding the Bangladesh, again, my suggestion would be that get a picture of the history, political history of Bangladesh. I've written a book, but there are other political history books. Ben Chandler's book is there. Said Mahmoud Ali's book is there. Looking into the tumultuous history of Bangladesh. So there are books that they can look into. But as for the current one, follow what is happening on the ground. Things are changing, and it is too early to make any recommendation.
Professor Riaz, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
That was Ali Riaz speaking to Himal Southasian for the State of Southasia podcast. This episode was edited by Ritika Chauhan. We'll keep our eye on Bangladesh, and you can find many more stories on politics and culture in Bangladesh and across South Asia on our website himalmag.com. We'll be back in 4 weeks with another in-depth conversation on the next episode of State of Southasia. Thank you for listening, and see you then.